Hello there, and welcome to Murder Most British. I'm Zach.
Hi, listeners. I'm Rachel.
Yeah, we're back for another one, baby. Let's go.
It's exciting.
That's what I'm talking about.
I love listening to all these cases and telling everybody about them because, obviously, you know, we hear a lot about people that committed the crimes and stuff, but, you know, it's nice to kind of keep the stories of the victims.
Well, also like stuff that people might not have heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another big one. But, you know, especially this one, it's really grim. It has a lot of heavy subjects, you know, poverty, alcoholism, and something that just spiraled out of control. Like everybody's just having a good time, and then whoops, something happened. You're like, holy shit. But, yeah.
Well, before we begin, here's just a small request from us.
If you could just give us a follow on whatever you're listening on, whatever podcast that you're listening on, and also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Murder Most British, and on Facebook, it's MMB Podcast.
You can join us in the public crypt chat, which is our free Discord, where you can talk cases, share theories, and read the latest news from our archives.
Your support helps us so much and helps the archive grow and ensures that no story is ever forgotten.
Okay, let's now get to the case.
Yeah. The stairwell on Dixon Avenue swallowed sound. Damp stone steps curved upward beneath a single bulb trembling in its rusted cage. On the top landing, a half-open door cast a thin blade of light across the wall. The air smelled of drink, cigarette ash, and the night's lingering rain. Neighbors later recalled low voices and the scrape of a chair, then silence settling again like dust. Outside, Cross Hill sat under its usual October drizzle, buses sighing down the road as windows dimmed across the city. Nothing set the door apart from hundreds just like it in Glasgow's south side. Yet before dawn, it would mark the boundary between the ordinary and the unspeakable. Here, the descent would simply become impossible to ignore, a quiet threshold waiting to be crossed.
Well, Glasgow in the late 1960s was a city between demolitions, whole districts pulled down, new estates rising in concrete. Amid the upheaval in 1968, Edith McAlinden was born into a working-class family whose struggles echoed the city's own. Low wages, hard drink, colder nights. Little survives of her childhood beyond that setting, but every account describes instability. A girl raised within a culture of scarcity where violence could erupt as quickly as the weather turned. What began as survival had hardened into habit.
By her teens, McAlinden drifted through care homes and short-term lodgings. She learned to live on the edges of Glasgow's south side, Govanhill, Cross Hill, Gorbals, where pubs served as both refuge and trap. She left school early, took casual work, and fell into petty crime, thefts, breach of peace, street fights that ended in the sheriff courts. Through the 1980s and 1990s, her name appeared again and again in police ledgers. Those who knew her remembered a quick temper, a sharp tongue, and a capacity for drink that blotted out memory. Sounds pretty rough.
Yeah. Well, McAlinden entered adulthood without stable accommodation. She moved frequently, staying wherever she could in the south side. Short-term rooms, acquaintances' flats, and occasionally temporary lodgings. Her life during those years was marked by the same instability recorded in police and court documents, arguments, alcohol, and arrests that punctuated one address after another. She had a son, and her son John also spent periods in local authority care. Contact between them was irregular, and he moved in and out of temporary or supervised accommodation throughout his childhood.
So just
it seems like,
kind of passed down, like a vicious cycle, passed down.
They do say that.
Unstable, environment.
Yeah.
But, well, in the early 2000s, McAlinden's life followed a familiar pattern to police and social workers alike. Intoxication, argument, assault, arrest, release, and repeat. That's that vicious cycle.
Yeah.
But by 2003, she was a familiar face in the Glasgow Sheriff Court. That year, she was jailed for a serious assault, a 9-month sentence that confined her to the women's wing of Cornton Vale Prison in Stirling. For the first time in years, her drinking stopped, and the enforced sobriety sharpened her restlessness.
Mm. I mean, in some ways, it's a good thing because it does help people to
unless
get
they're
clean,
making hooch in the
good old hooch. Yeah, I think probably every prisoner obviously attempts to make that.
Gotta make a little hooch, man.
Nasty. Smells like sick. Well, while she served her sentence, life outside continued in the same circles she had left. Friends in Govanhill, acquaintances who drank with her, and people she relied on for short-term places to stay. Among them was David Gillespie, a 42-year-old labourer known for his own heavy drinking. He shared a flat on Dixon Avenue, a worn 3-room space at the top of a tenement, with 2 older gentlemen, 67-year-old Ian Mitchell and a 71-year-old named Anthony Coyle. Gillespie and McAllinden had met before her imprisonment, their relationship fueled by alcohol and volatility.
So the day came on the 16th of October 2004. McAllinden left Cornton Vale with a small bag and a discharge note, stepping into a world that felt both familiar and distant. Freedom had arrived without a plan. She traveled back toward Glasgow, south side streets she knew by heart, and made for Cross Hill. Somewhere between the prison gates and the city limits, she stopped for alcohol.
By evening, she was back in her old terrain, pubs echoing with jukeboxes, cigarettes glowing in doorways, money already running thin. She fell back in with David, and later the pair met Ian in a Southside bar. Ian, friendly as ever, suggested they carry the night on at his flat in Dixon Avenue. They took him up on it. Up the tenement stair, into the warm fog of the living room, the drinking rolled on. Voices rose, laughter slurred. The city beyond the windows sank into night, rain streaking the glass.
In that narrow space, a single door between past and future, Edith crossed back into her old life, into that old cycle again. The top floor flat on Dixon Avenue was small even by Glasgow standards. 3 worn rooms tucked beneath a sloped tenement roof, sparsely furnished and close with the smell of old carpet and years of drink. Its tenants formed an uneasy household. So you've got David Gillespie, who lived for the weekend. He was the party man. Ian Mitchell, he's stretched on a small pension. And you've got Anthony Coyle, a retired shipyard worker, and he didn't really drink at all. A lot of people called him a teetotal. Gillespie and Mitchell brought their pub-soaked laughter back with Edith beside them, while Coyle kept to his usual rhythm, a brief hello, then retreating to quieter rooms as the noise rose.
Well, the 3 of them spilled into the living room in what neighbours later described as a rowdy but friendly mood. Voices rising, footsteps uncertain. The kind of late-night energy that echoes down a tenement close. Gillespie and Mitchell poured fresh drinks, almost as soon as the door shut. The clatter of bottles and the scrape of chairs setting the night's pace. Laughter flared, then thinned, then fled again, as the room warmed with alcohol and exhaustion. Edith settled into the chaos with the ease of someone returning to familiar ground. For a while, the flat swayed with a rough, unsteady camaraderie, the fragile calm that always comes before the storm.
But as the drink deepened, the tone shifted. Accounts differ on the spark. Money owed, a stray comment about her time inside. Who knows? But the effect was the same. Voices tightened, then rose, then dropped into a single male shout. In the hush that followed, something in McAllinden fixed hard. A change in the room's weather that everyone felt before they understood it.
The men tried to settle her, but the space had already shrunk. Chairs scraped back, a glass tipped onto the carpet, and her voice climbed again, angry, slurred, insistent. For a moment she seemed less a guest than a force of gathering inside the walls. and the air grew thick with the kind of tension that doesn't need words to announce itself.
Outside, Cross Hill was already deep into the late night quiet. Inside the flat, the air felt heavy. The television flickered in the corner, its sound low, and the room showed the strain of hours of drinking. Curtains pulled unevenly, an ashtray tipped, bottles left where they fell.
Very messy then.
Yeah, they're
It's a messy night.
You get out of jail, you're going to party.
Yeah.
And she's partying hard.
We've been there.
Yeah. Well, not coming out of jail.
No,
anyways,
but obviously just having a good old drink, if you've spilt something, you just, you don't even think about it.
I'll clean that up tomorrow.
Well, near midnight, Mitchell, the older peacekeeper by habit, urged everyone to settle. It worked only briefly. A thin calm stretched over exhaustion and too much drink. Edith stayed because she had nowhere else to go. The flat was the only refuge left to her. Gillespie drank harder, his words turning jagged, and by the small hours the room had slipped past its usual limits. Every voice carried on edge now, the kind that warns of a turn coming.
A neighbor on the stair heard a single muffled thud, then a woman's voice, low and furious. After that, nothing. The television pulsed against the wallpaper, coloring the stillness. Outside, the rain softened over Victoria Road, while behind the top floor door, the night braced for what was about to break.
The turn, when it came, wasn't loud. It began with a movement, small, sharp, that cut through the stagnant air of the living room. Hours of drink and had stripped the night of balance, leaving everyone too close, too tired, and too quick to react. A chair shifted, someone rose too fast, and the last thread of calm gave way. In that narrow space, the mood changed in an instant. No more talking, no more warning, only the movement before something irreversible.
Yeah. You just know, there's something, like when a fight breaks out at a pub or something, you could just see something shifting.
Yeah.
Some sort of tension. You're just like, whoa. And then, boom.
Yeah, there's this, just split second where you click that something bad's going to happen.
Yep, something about to just go
down.
down.
You foresee it before it's even happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so then the violence broke out fully. Edith McAllinden seized a knife and drove it into David Gillespie's thighs. Once, then again, until one strike cut into his femoral artery. Blood came fast, not dramatic, but deadly. Soaking into the carpet in a widening dark, the room changed with it. The shouting stopped, movement stalled, and within minutes the night had shifted from chaos to something colder, quieter, and impossible to undo. Yeah, that's bad because he's been drinking all night and thinning out his blood.
That would thin the blood, wouldn't it?
That's catastrophic.
Crikey. Well, for a moment, no one moved. The room held a stunned stillness, broken only by the low noise of the television in the corner. Gillespie was already fading, the blood loss fast and unforgiving. The others stood in the narrow living room, caught between shock and the realisation that the night had just crossed a line that they couldn't step back from.
Panic doesn't always flee. Sometimes it reaches for help. Edith called her 17-year-old son, John, and told him to come to the flat. He didn't come alone. 16-year-old Jamie Gray came with him, the two boys arriving by taxi in the early hours. They climbed the tenement stair, and when they reached the top landing, it was Ian Mitchell who answered. Edith told Ian to pay for the taxi fare, and he did, taking their arrival at face value, assuming they were there to steady whatever trouble the night had already begun to spill into the flat.
Well, for several minutes, everything held. 3 rooms, 3 men, a woman and 2 teenagers adjusting to the strange gravity of the place. Anthony Coyle had already withdrawn to his bedroom after a brief hello when he came home, keeping well clear of the tension tightening in the living room. Furniture had been shifted and left where it fell. A glass lay on its side beneath a chair. A darkening stain was beginning to spread where no one wanted to look. Outside, the rain pressed against the windows as the night moved on without them.
Well, as the boys showed up, the balance shifted again. John grasped the truth of the room in one hard blink. Mitchell had seen too much. He was not a helper. He was a witness. The decision that followed was obscene in its speed. John stabbed Mitchell, and when Mitchell went down, John stamped and kicked on his head with a furious finality. It was short, vicious, and it ended the old man where he lay.
The space seemed to shrink. From his bedroom, Coyle heard the shift in the flat, the sudden movement, the raised voices, something heavy hitting the floor. He didn't step into the passage. He only pulled back further, turned the key, and tried to let the thin door stand in for safety. In the corridor, the boys were already moving, their voices low and deliberate, the kind of talk that pretends at calm and never holds.
Yeah, another witness.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he was in his room, he wasn't even out there. But they fetched.
It's that split second of what do you do?
Yeah.
And obviously
you're like, oh, well, everybody that's in here has got to die.
The only way that
That's
they're
crazy.
going to, or think to seem that they're going to get away with it is by them three just, right.
You just kill everybody and just leave. Nobody will know it was us.
And we don't say a thing.
That's crazy. You just got to tax a guy that just brought you here that can point you out. Well, they decided to fetch a small handheld drill.
Oh, dear
The kind
God.
kept for simple repairs and set to the bedroom door. So I'm guessing it's shared accommodation where you've got a lock on your room, that type of thing. Well, the lock gave quickly under the bit, the mechanism splintering enough for the door to be pushed inward. Jamie Gray went in first, the golf club rising and falling, the blows landing on the mattress and then on bone. He beat Coyle to death. The violence was direct, unhesitating, and over in moments. So you just beat an old man to death with a golf club for no fucking reason other than he was there. Absolutely horrible.
That's a vicious attack, that. There is a moment, though, after the storm when the air refuses to move. It came now, on the television. A highlight reel shifted to an advert. In the kitchen sink, a tap ticked. Somewhere, a neighbour turned over in bed. Inside the flat, the carpet held more than it could drink.
And if you think that it couldn't get much worse, here we go. What followed was not flight, but a messy, lingering aftermath. Bodies in 3 rooms, voices low and directionless, the smell of metal and smoke growing thick. The attempts at order were clumsy and cruel, but in the chaos, someone had a great idea. No.
Is it really a great idea?
This is just so gross that when I was like, are you kidding me that these people did this? They're like, hey guys, great idea. Let's pour boiling water over the victims. It was a grotesque test, a way to see who might still twitch and who would not. It changed nothing except the air. Yeah.
Gross.
They poured boiling water on these guys. Are they still alive? Fucking gross, man.
It's not like they're thinking, oh, well, if there could be fingerprints on the body, well, let's pour this on and it will, somehow melt away the fingerprints, Oh,
well,
I mean,
they're crazy. This is just sickening and crazy, I tell you.
Well, the flat showed the shape of what had happened. Blood marked the floors and the walls in several rooms. Furniture had been moved or knocked over. A trail of drops led through the hall. In Coyle's room, the bedding was disturbed where he tried to protect himself. Every part of the flat held some trace of the violence that had passed through it.
Well, by around 3 a.m., the fragile plan collapsed into exhaustion. Edith crossed the landing to a neighbor, James Sweeney, and begged him to look in on the flat. Whether she hoped for rescue, absolution, or simply another pair of hands, only she could say. Sweeney stepped inside and saw enough in a single glance to understand the gravity of what he'd walked into. He backed right out, reached for his phone, and called emergency services.
Well, the paramedics arrived within the first wash of blue light across the close. Inside, they found Edith on the floor beside Gillespie, shouting at him to wake up as they pulled her back. He was already gone. In other rooms, Mitchell and Coyle lay where they had fallen, each surrounded by marks of what had been done to them. The medics worked quickly, but there was little left to save. Uniformed officers followed them in, and within minutes, Edith McAllinden was under arrest, her hands cuffed as she stared at the bodies she'd lived among only hours before.
I don't know what she was going for there. Like,
I mean,
try to be like, someone came in and killed him, but didn't kill me, or I have no idea. Or just she's so delirious from it's so late, she's drunk, and just the grief of what she'd done.
I mean, setting aside the alcohol, being drunk, I think she would have thought, oh, well, if I, act like I've just strolled in here and found them like it, by sort of saying, oh, please wake up or whatever.
Yeah.
But obviously
But then the neighbor can just go,
they were here all evening.
She told me to come over here and look at it. It's just craziness.
Yeah. I think it just shows that obviously having so much alcohol changes your inhibitions and the way of you thinking, that you really do not think straight a lot of the time. So,
well, morning pushed into the flat slowly, catching on overturned furniture and the stains that ran across the floors. The television still flickered in the corner, soundless against the quiet. 3 bodies lay in 3 rooms, the heat leaving them by degrees as the air settled into something cold and final. Outside, the city moved into another day. Inside, nothing shifted. The violence had ended, and the flat held its stillness until the investigators took over, the night's chaos giving way to the first order of the morning.
Well, at dawn, Dixon Avenue lay sealed behind blue and white police tape. Uniformed officers logged every entry into the close as the forensic team began their first sequence of photographs. Each stair, landing and handrail was captured before anyone advanced further inside. Police had arrived just after 3:15 a.m. Paramedics formally confirmed 3 fatalities shortly afterward, allowing detectives to assume control. Outside, a crime scene van idled while SOCOs unloaded gloves, sealed evidence bags, luminol kits, footwear casting materials, and the box tools that signalled the beginning of a major homicide inquiry.
By mid-morning, officers moved in a slow fingertip search across the pavement and through the close entrance, tagging and lifting each item in electronic sequence. Cigarette ends that didn't match the residence brands, bottle cap beneath a windowsill, a scuff mark across stone suggesting movement during the night. At Cathcart Police Office, the incident room opened and the first appeal went out for anyone who had heard movement after midnight. CCTV teams collected footage from a nearby off-license on Victoria Road, corner shop, and a late-night taxi office, grainy recordings, some with incorrect timestamps that required manual verification.
While search teams worked through the building, detectives began their first wave of interviews. Residents were questioned about taxis in the early hours, unfamiliar figures on the stairs, and whether anyone had noticed the 2 teenagers later linked to the flat. All households in the close provided statements. Officers also completed routine criminal history checks on the deceased's, confirming prior contact with police, but nothing related to the night's events. Most recollections were blurred by drink or sleep, but a few timings began to align.
By late morning, a senior detective addressed the reporters gathering outside the cordon. He confirmed that the deaths were being treated as suspicious and urged anyone with information to contact the incident room. Behind him, the constable widened the tape to prevent the crowd from drifting too near the entrance. The statement was brief. Rain drifted across the street as the cordon held its position.
Well, inside the flat, the forensic team worked room by room. The living room was recorded first. Furniture displaced, bottles and debris left where they had fallen. Along the corridor, blood patterns and several footwear impressions were photographed before being lifted. Luminol testing was carried out to identify diluted or wiped traces. In the bedroom, the lock displayed clean mechanical disruption consistent with a tool forced through soft metal. The golf club lay where it had been dropped. Handles of both the knife and the club were swabbed for DNA. Each fragment of the knife was catalogued in turn.
Meanwhile, technicians prepared for the postmortems authorized earlier in the morning by the Procurator Fiscal. Their findings would provide the backbone of the early reconstruction, the sequence of injuries, approximate timing of death, and whether any wounds occurred postmortem. Toxicology later established that Gillespie and Mitchell were heavily intoxicated, limiting their ability to resist. Coyle's results showed no alcohol, pretty much, but his age and locked room made him equally vulnerable. Forensic officers continued searching outside the building, checking gutters, bins, and recesses where items might have been discarded before the neighbor raised the alarm.
As the evidence accumulated, investigators gained a clearer impression. The injuries, the forced door, and the distinct locations of the bodies all suggested the involvement of more than one perpetrator. The phrase later used publicly, quote, "impossible to be precise about the details of the violence," took shape here, in a flat, offering too many overlapping possibilities for a single attacker.
Yeah, from what I was reading in that, it was just blood everywhere. Like all over the walls, floor, ceiling. Like they really had to pinpoint okay, this is here, this is this person, and once they've mapped it out, they're like, it wasn't this one lady.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been just this one lady that ran, like, systematically murdered 3 people.
Mm.
They're like, there's more than one guy here, or one person.
Well, you'd think, obviously, if somebody's attacking, then, and there's more than just that person that they're attacking, that there would be evidence that the other person's stepping in, trying to sort of, help the person being attacked. So, it's quite, with all the evidence that they can gather, that they can actually piece together this puzzle and come up with the fact that,
especially
it shows
a messy scene like this.
Yeah. You would think, how on earth can they pinpoint that it's actually more than just one person in such a mess, know?
All them shoe impressions and movement.
I come to realise that the police are pretty good at puzzles.
They're really good at gathering the evidence.
Yeah.
Here's a shoe print. Look at, there we go. That's a different person. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But the door-to-door inquiries continued through the afternoon. Officers asked residents about any noises that might refine the timeline. Raised voices, a thud, the whir of a drill, and whether anyone had seen 2 young men near the close after midnight. Most accounts were partial, but several pointed toward the same loose description: 2 teenagers moving quickly sometime after the early hours. At Cathcart, the phones rang steadily. Investigations rely on borrowed clocks, taxi logs, pub receipts, and the CCTV timestamps from corner shops. Some material surfaced immediately, some would never surface at all, but the neighbor's entry into the flat around 3 a.m. remained the fixed point, anchoring the wider reconstruction.
By early evening, the working theory had sharpened. More than one person had moved through the flat, and the acts were sequential rather than simultaneous. The confined blood patterns in the corridor and the concentrated blows in the bedroom made that clear. Supervisors authorised extended shifts, widening the search perimeter to hedges, back courts, gutters, and recesses bypassed earlier. Before official paperwork was drafted, a tabloid nickname, House of Blood, began circulating, sending the phone lines into constant motion with tips ranging from specific to impossible.
The following morning, the inquiry shifted from stabilizing the scene to forming its first conclusions. Edith did not require tracing. She had been present when officers arrived, was detained at the scene, and was taken into custody under suspicion of murder. She appeared the next day at Glasgow Sheriff Court to face the initial charge. Her account was inconsistent in parts, but one detail repeated. Her son had been involved. Detectives logged it and continued pulling apart the statements from neighbors and associates for any corroborating names or routes in and out of the flat.
Progress through the early interviews was slow, but then changed directions days into the inquiry when a man from a homeless unit named Brian Gallagher walked into a police station and reported that John McAlendon had boasted about the killings. His account was taken formally, recorded as a significant witness entry, and included direct quotations attributed to John. For the first time since the scene was secured, detectives had a lead that pointed sharply toward a second suspect already named by Edith.
Yeah, what a guy, boasting about killing old men.
I mean, in some ways, lucky, because it then gave, this guy, obviously a lot of people would brush it off like, yeah, all right, just talking shit, you know what I mean? You're just trying to get some attention or whatever. But for the homeless guy to actually listen to that and take that in and go to the police and say, well, this is what I've heard, investigate,
Yeah. Well, so from there, the arrest moved quickly. So John McAlendon was traced to a South Side address and detained, and officers recorded that he offered no resistance. Jamie Gray was located soon afterwards at another address. When cautioned and detained, he made no comment. Both were transported separately to custody suites for interview. With all three suspects now in custody, one from the scene itself, two from elsewhere in the city, the core structure of the case settled into place. Got him.
Well, so with John being arrested, clearly he must have. Where did they get Jamie from? They must have. He must have said,
they probably collected all the CCTV and the taxi, and they said, well, it wasn't just one guy; it was two guys, and they actually managed to identify. Yeah, John
Jamie.
And Jamie have been friends since they were kids, and they were inseparable.
Yeah, always together.
One was there, the other one was probably there as well.
Well, interviews broadened, running alongside ongoing forensic analysis. DNA results began returning from the laboratory. Swabs lifted from the knife handle, the golf club grip, and door surfaces around the forced lock. Footwear impressions were compared against shoe sizes during the arrests. CCTV was stabilised frame by frame to confirm movements before and after the likely window of violence. None of these elements provided a complete narrative, though, but each one narrowed the margins around the sequence already emerging from the postmortems and from the structure of the flat itself.
By the end of that phase of the investigation, the investigators had reached a stable account. 3 men dead, 3 individuals implicated, a locked bedroom door forced open, and a night of violence that moved through 3 rooms in the same narrow flat. The evidence did not clarify every detail, but it anchored responsibility to those now in custody. What remained was for the legal process to test, formalize, and ultimately present the structure in court.
The High Court of Justiciary in Glasgow convened with formal precision as the 3 were accused: Edith McAlendon, her 17-year-old son John, and 16-year-old Jamie Gray. All 3 faced charges for the 3 murders committed in the same flat on a single October night.
Opening the Crown's case, the advocate deputy told the jury their task was simple: to follow the evidential structure, what was done, by whom, and in what order. He kept the focus tight. The jury was shown scene photographs and a handful of exhibits, not to revisit the violence, but to establish the factual anchors the law required: a knife, a golf club, and the drilled bedroom lock.
The early witnesses dealt only with first response. A neighbour described entering the flat around 3 a.m. and calling emergency services. A paramedic outlined the positions of the bodies and why nothing could be done. A scenes of crimes officer explained how the flat had been recorded and preserved, the fingerprints lifted, the photographs taken, the lock documented as found.
And with how messy that the place was.
Mm.
Like for them to be able to go to the jury and say, okay, this is what happened. It's just amazing. Like, okay,
I do find it
first.
fascinating with all the forensic side of, investigations.
Yeah. It was so great. Like you say, okay, well, this happened first. There's all the blood and all that. And then this happened next. This is where it happened. And there's where all this blood is.
Yeah. It's amazing how forensics can actually tell the story of in sequence of what happened, and not just be for somebody that's not trained in forensics would just go in and be like, right, well, we look at all this, we see this evidence, but actually putting it into like a timeline of events.
Yeah, like who died first?
Yeah, like
how, and who did it?
Yeah, that's I suppose where every single forensic evidence pulls together to obviously help show the truth of what happened. So yeah, forensics, brilliant.
Yeah, the forensic pathologist is who followed next. Their testimony was clinical and uncontested. Each victim's cause of death was presented briefly. The advocate deputy reminded the jury that Scots law does not require motive for murder. The case centered on responsibility, not interpretation.
Well, then the trial shifted. Midway through proceedings, all three accused altered their pleas. Edith admitted the murder of David Gillespie. John admitted the murder of Ian Mitchell. And Jamie Gray admitted the murder of Anthony Coyle. From that point on, the Crown no longer had to prove participation, only to tie each admission to the evidence already before the court.
Yeah, I think they, at some point, they were like, yeah.
I think that's the
done.
thing. When prosecution, throw all the evidence, they're like, well, I can't, there's no way I can get out of this, So, and also the benefit of pleading guilty, lesser sentences, so.
Well, so the exhibits were revisited briefly, but only as confirmation. The drilled lock associated with Coyle's room, the golf club corresponding to his injuries, the knife linked to Gillespie's fatal wound, and then, obviously, when they beat Mitchell to death and stamped on his head and stabbed him, nothing was disputed. The jury's role had become one of a formal record rather than deliberation.
Well, defence submissions reflected the change. With liability accepted, counsel offered only background for the judge's consideration. Instability, alcohol misuse, and for John and Jamie, their youth. As one put it, quote, "My submission relates to disposal only. No challenge was made to the factual evidence."
In closing, the advocate deputy stated the position plainly, 3 lives taken in 3 separate acts, each now acknowledged by the person responsible. The remaining question for the court was the appropriate punishment parts for the mandatory life sentences.
Well, on the 29th of June 2005, sentence was passed. Edith McAlendon received life imprisonment with a minimum term of 13 years. John McAlendon, her son, and Jamie Gray were each sentenced to life with minimum terms of 12 years. The judge emphasised that these were not release dates, only the earliest points at which the parole board might consider their cases.
Don't let them out.
This is the thing. I mean, with me, I think, if you take a life, you do life. When they say life sentence, but it's on a minimal term basis.
Obviously, I think there does some interpretation of, like if they were out of their mind, high on drugs, yes,
obviously there's going to be mitigations, but
yes, thank you, mitigating circumstances, but like John and Jamie, they rolled up in there and they just said, these boys got to die. And I'm like, what? Like, you come into this scene, that's cold-blooded. That is cold-blooded.
And they've clearly done that, not to protect themselves initially, because they weren't the ones that had killed the first victim, so they've done that in order to protect
Edith.
But they've now then, gone on to commit the other 2 murders between them. And there was just no need.
Just cold-blooded. Like, well, instead of just handing her in and saying she was so drunk and crazed when she did this, have some mitigating whatever. They're like, let's just kill these other guys and maybe we can
just make the whole situation even worse and become murderers themselves. It's horrendous. This crime is pretty horrendous.
And then them, pouring boiling water over the bodies and stuff. That's just unnecessary cruelty.
Yeah.
There's
just absolutely no need for that.
Yeah, it brings it up to a point where you're just like, maybe they don't need to be let out.
Yeah, that's quite a sinister thing to do, to be fair.
Well, with that ending, the hearing was over. The state's role was complete. 3 men dead, 3 people convicted, and sentences set to run far beyond the night that created them.
Well, the 3 life sentences drew a line under the legal story, but not the one that the city told itself. In Glasgow's south side, the name House of Blood had already taken on a half-mythic chill. Shorthand for a night when poverty, drink and chance turned a tenement into a tomb. Newspapers revisited it in anniversaries and retrospectives, each retelling sanding away context until only the horror remained. The public learned the headline, not the circumstances that had starved it into being.
Dixon Avenue was scrubbed, repainted, and relet. The flat passed through council inventory, listed for clearance and later refurbishment. In tenancy records, it became, again, just one unit among many. The door replaced, the floor relaid, no plaque, no marker. The neighbors who had heard the voices in 2004 spoke of it less each year, until silence did its slow, merciful work.
But John McAllenden's name surfaced again.
Oh, God, here we go. What?
Yeah. Well, he was freed on licence in October of 2016.
Are you kidding me?
Nope, he was freed. He was recalled less than 2 years later, though, after an incident in Glasgow city centre.
Shocker.
Witnesses heard him shouting at his partner, then Lauren Cassidy, and saw him knock a phone from her hand. She refused to cooperate with prosecutors and was described as hostile throughout. McAllenden had originally been charged with kicking and hitting her on the body, but his not guilty plea to those allegations was accepted by the Crown. He admitted only the threatening and abusive behaviour. The breach was enough. The parole board ordered his return to custody.
Good.
We can't be doing anything like that on,
without
a licence. But
she stood by him, and was like, no, and she did. She didn't cooperate. What, girl, get out of there.
Yeah.
Like you deserve better than that. Don't go with guys like that. God. Ugh. Well, Edith McAllenden remains in custody, nearly 20 years on. She has made little attempt to appeal her sentence or to publicly explain her actions. Her name appears only in routine prison notices, an inmate serving a life term, reviewed at intervals but never released. Jamie Gray stayed inside as well. Reports from the time noted that he struggled in custody, showing early signs of trauma connected to what he had witnessed and done in the flat that night. He kept a low profile, and like Edith, has remained largely absent from the public record. Well, that's crazy. Like, I don't excuse what he did, but I think he went there with his friend, and what happened, and he was just caught up in it as well. But he was the one that went in there and beat Anthony Coyle to death. Like, at some point you just gotta be like, yay, bro, I'm out of here, and just leave.
I mean, at 16, such a waste of life.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's extremely sad for these victims, but it's also extremely sad for the people that have done it, because they essentially have lost their lives.
Yeah.
I just wish society was a little bit more.
And for what? They were just sitting there protecting Edith, trying to get her off the hook or something.
It's extremely sad.
It's so insane how it went down. Like I was like, I can't believe this, that they just rolled in there and was like, let's do this.
It's very shocking. Obviously, you could expect sort of John to sort of stand by his mum, and in some sense, because of the relationship between them, there is always that familial connection that...
Yeah, that's his mom.
Yeah. And you're taught grown up to look out for your family and, but I think for me, I definitely would not stand by someone, it doesn't matter who it is. If my mum went out and done that, I'd be like rolling in there and be like, what the hell have you done? I'm phoning the police, blah, blah, blah.
Call the police. Exactly. I'm sorry, but you're going down.
Exactly. It's hard to get into the mentality of people that actually choose to commit murder alongside the parent, in this situation, and not actually just be like, well, what the hell have you done? I'm phoning the police.
But this is crazy because they weren't even involved.
Yeah.
And they just rolled in there and they're like, let's go,
But it's like it makes you think, did she tell them? When she's calling him up saying you need to get here, she's obviously must have told them what happened over the phone.
Had that much
Has she
influence?
said, oh, you need to, come over and bloody help? Like, it's just horrendous crime, this is.
Yeah.
Well, for criminologists and reporters, the case endures less as anomaly than as emblem. An example of familial violence shaped by addiction and deprivation. A social catastrophe made literal. It appears in discussions of Glasgow's early 2000s homicide peak. Part of the argument that murder is often less mystery than a grim equation. Poverty plus alcohol plus proximity plus despair.
Well, the city moved on, as cities do. But the image persisted. That narrow stairwell, the flicker of the bulb, the hush before discovery. Every generation of detectives inherits a few addresses they never forget. Dixon Avenue sits among them. Its walls long repainted, its story unerasable.
At dusk, the sandstone tenements still hold the day's warmth, and the air carries the faint hiss of rain on slate. Beneath those windows, the street continues, children's voices, passing buses, the small domestic clatter of life resuming. Nothing remains of that night but name, and the way that the city still lowers its voice when it says it.
Well, that was the House of Blood. So you've got Edith, Jamie, and John. Crazy.
Our thoughts go out to the victims, obviously, in every case that we cover, and their families. We do understand that no matter what, they still have to live with. There's always going to be some pain over losing people this way. It's horrendous. But we do think of the families in these cases.
And they just, it was for nothing. Died for nothing.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Very sad.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And we hope that you follow us. Give us a comment, a like. Tell us what you think about the case. What did you think about it? What did you think about all this insanity? Give us a follow on TikTok and Instagram at Murder Most British and MMB Podcast on Facebook.
And as we say every week, we have a link tree for everywhere you can follow us down below. So until next week, stay safe and stay curious.
Bye-bye.